Welcome to another show. Today is our second of a three-part show looking at science fiction on television during the 1960s.
Welcome aboard the Seaview, gentlemen. I'm Irwin Allen, the producer and sometimes writer-director of this new series.
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is a 1964 American science fiction television series which lasted until 1968, giving us 110 episodes. It was based on the 1961 film of the same name. Both were created by Irwin Allen, which enabled the film's sets, costumes, props, special effects models, and sometimes footage to be used in the production of the television series. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was the first of Irwin Allen's four science fiction television series, and the longest running. The 110 episodes produced included 32 shot in black and white, and 78 filmed in color. The show starred Richard Basehart and David Hedison. The first season's 31 episodes included gritty, atmospheric storylines devoted to Cold War themes and excursions into near-future speculative fiction, involving espionage and sci-fi elements.
Full speed ahead!
Irwin called, and he wanted me to do a film called Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And after my experience on The Lost World, I couldn't face it, because it was basically the same thing. So I turned it down. And then a couple of years after that, he called me for Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, the series. I turned that down. And the guy wouldn't let go. So finally, after I heard that Richard Basehart was playing the Admiral, I was terribly impressed that he got Richard. And I thought, well, God, if Richard Basehart can do this, I certainly can.
No, sir, the orders are quite clear. To complete the mission, I'm to regard Seaview and her entire crew as expendable.
If you have a choice, though, Captain, I assume you'll bring us all back alive.
Aliens, sea monsters, and dinosaurs were featured, but the primary villains were hostile foreign governments. While fantastic, the scripts had a recognizably contemporary setting. The second season began with a trip inside a whale, a trip inside a volcano, and a few Cold War intrigue and nuclear war-themed episodes, and saw several brushes with world disaster. The season ended with a ghost story, one of the show's few sequels. The third season began with Dick Tufeld, the voice of the robot on Lost in Space, playing an evil disembodied brain from outer space. The season continued with a werewolf story that is one of the few episodes to inspire a sequel. In one episode, the Seaview's officers and crew encountered Nazis who believed World War II was still ongoing. The third season only had 2 espionage stories and 1 ocean peril story that were reminiscent of the first season. One of those 3 stories was about a hostile foreign government trying to steal a strange new mineral with the aid of a brainwashed Admiral Nelson. This espionage story was the end of the third season. The final 2 seasons continued the shift towards paranormal storylines that were popular in the late 1960s. Mummies, werewolves, talking puppets, and an evil leprechaun all walked the corridors of the Seaview. Gold Key Comics put out a series that ran 16 issues from 1964 to 1970. Theodore Sturgeon wrote a novel, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, based on the original script written by Irwin Allen for the movie, and published in 1961. Stock footage of Seaview was used in the Wonder Woman episode The Bermuda Triangle Crisis. James Doohan, who played Lawrence Tobin in Hotline and hailed to the Chief, was offered the part of Chief Sharkey, but turned it down, because that same week he was offered and accepted the role of Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott of the Starship Enterprise on Star Trek, which became his definitive role. Terry Becker accepted the role of Sharkey. Not a single actress appeared in any episode during the entire 4th season, even as a voice or non-speaking role. Del Monroe was the only actor to appear in both the movie Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and the TV show, playing virtually the same character. He was Seaman Kowski in the movie and Seaman Kowalski on TV. The series was satirized as Voyage to See What's on the Bottom by artist Mort Drucker and writer Dick DeBartolo in the March 1966 issue of Mad Magazine number 101.
My agent came to me and said, Quinn Martin wants you to do a series for him. He said, but it's science fiction. And I said, no. Science fiction, you'll have the death knell forever. You do science fiction and forever people are going to be talking to you about aliens and flying saucers. And they were talking about the concept, and Quinn Martin said, I don't want a lot of special effects. I don't want to. He said, this is a study in paranoia. And now he's talking to me, the actor. I think, okay.
The Invaders. Starring Roy Finnis as architect David Vincent.
The Invaders is an American science fiction television series created by Larry Cohen that aired on ABC for 2 seasons. From 1967 to 1968, Roy Thanes stars as David Vincent, who after stumbling across evidence of an in-progress invasion of aliens from outer space, the aliens disguising themselves as humans and gradually infiltrating human institutions.
We will be ready.
I don't want to get involved.
Vincent, I don't want any part of this.
Neither do I. I never have. But I know they're here.
The Invaders is an American science fiction television series created by Larry Cohen that aired on ABC for 2 seasons. From 1967 to 1968, Roy Thanes stars as David Vincent, who after stumbling across evidence of an in-progress invasion of aliens from outer space, the aliens disguising themselves as humans and gradually infiltrating human institutions, tries to thwart the invasion despite the disbelief of officials and the general public, and the undermining of his efforts by the aliens. The series was a Quinn Martin production. The architect David Vincent accidentally learns of a secret alien invasion already underway and thereafter travels from place to place attempting to foil the aliens' plots and warn a skeptical populace of the danger. Other plot elements include Vincent's grim and lonely determination to find tangible proof of the invaders' existence despite having become a quasi-famous object of public ridicule, the aliens' success in hiding their plots, undermining Vincent's credibility in killing off those who also discover them in ways disguised as a natural death, and the constant tension over whether the individuals Vincent comes across are humans or aliens. Most of the aliens, in particular the lowest-ranking members or workers in green jumpsuits, are emotionless and have deformed little fingers. Black aliens' palms were not pale, like humans of African descent, but were the same shade as the rest of their skins. The inspiration was the wave of alien doppelganger films which had come 10 years before in the 1950s, typified by Invasion of the Body Snatchers and the British film Quatermass 2, known in America as Enemy from Space. Also typical of Quinn Martin productions at the time, the show was divided into acts labeled by the Roman numerals 1 to 4, preceded by a cold open. A narration preceded Act 1, and Act 4 came before an epilogue with narration at the end. The true form of the invaders was never completely revealed, except for glimpses of the creatures in 2 episodes. The invaders' human forms were unstable and had to be regenerated periodically, or else they would die. There was never a full-size UFO built for the show. The saucer was a filming miniature that was optically printed into the sky whenever it was shown flying. A full-size set that represented the landing legs was built for long shots of people approaching the landed saucer. For these shots, the miniature was matted over the landing legs. Characters could even be shown climbing up into the UFO in tight shots of the land legs set. Apparently, the control room within the saucer was a semi-permanent set. The other areas within the ship changed with various episodes. The show was remade in 1995 as a mini-series.
But trust no one.
Someone tried to kill me last night.
For nothing is what it seems.
As this was a remake, the David Vincent character in it is not the same from the old show, despite being played by the same actor. He's David Vincent Jr. in the remake. Gold Key published several issues of an Invaders comic book. There were 10 novels published based on the series. And Mad Magazine parroted the series in issue number 119 called The Invasioners.
2 American scientists are lost in the swirling maze of past and future ages during the first experiments on America's greatest and most secret project, the Time Tunnel.
The Time Tunnel is an American science fiction TV series starring James Darren and Robert Colbert. The show was creator-producer Irwin Allen's 3rd science fiction television series and was released by 20th Century Fox Television and broadcast on ABC. The show ran for 1 season of 30 episodes from 1966 to 1967. A new pilot was produced in 2002 but did not proceed to a series.
First Commandment, we don't take anything or do anything for personal reasons. If you do, it's considered treason. One misstep back there, and our present changes forever.
A History of the Series by Martin Grams, Jr. was published in 2012. Project TikTok is a top-secret U.S. government effort to build an experimental time machine, known as the Time Tunnel due to its appearance as an elliptical passageway. The base for Project TikTok is a huge, hidden underground complex in Arizona. The directors of the project are Dr. Douglas Phillips, played by Robert Colbert, Dr. Anthony Newman, played by James Darren, and Lieutenant General Haywood Kirk, played by Whit Bissell. The specialists assisting them are Dr. Raymond Swain, played by John Zaremba, a foremost expert in electronics, and Dr. Ian McGregor, played by Lee Meriwether.
This is a red alert. Red alert. All time tunnel personnel report to their stations on the double.
It was really, for me, some of the most difficult acting I've ever had to do, because what went on in the time tunnel itself, we saw images of our two compatriots in trouble and in dire straits throughout the entire series. But we never saw that footage. If we were lucky, the director had filmed some of it ahead of time, so he was able to tell us, yes, now Doug is just about to step on the landmine, just about, but not quite. Or the knife is this close to Jimmy Darren, or maybe out to here. And so I got to the point where I said, when he hadn't filmed it, when he hadn't directed the scene yet that we're supposed to be watching, and our reactions have to mirror what is happening.
United States Senator Leroy Clark, played by Gary Merrill, comes to investigate to determine whether the project is worth continuing.
Hello, Leroy.
Woody?
Hi, it's been a long time.
How did they ever get an old dog face like you out of the mud?
Huh?
Senator Clark feels the project is a waste of government funds. When speaking to Phillips, Kirk, and Newman in front of the time tunnel, he delivers an ultimatum: either they send someone into time and return him during the course of his visit, or their funding will cease. Tony volunteers for this endeavor, but he is turned down by project director Doug Phillips. Defying this decision, Tony sends himself into time. Doug follows shortly after to rescue him, but they both continue to be lost in time. The series won an Emmy Award in 1967 for individual achievements in cinematography. The award went to L.B. Bill Abbott for his photographic special effects. Although the time tunnel was scheduled on Fridays, often considered the Friday night death slot for TV programs, the ratings for the series were solid. ABC pointed to the time tunnel as one of the few successes in a disastrous schedule. A series titled The Legend of Custer was lobbied to drop the time tunnel in favor of Custer. The network headquarters gave green light for Custer, and the time tunnel was canceled. The Legend of Custer was itself canceled after airing 17 low-rated episodes, skewered by critics and performed worse than the time tunnel. Another story claims after one season of good reviews, but mediocre ratings, ABC offered to renew the series if producer Irwin Allen would cut his budget by 1/3. He refused, and the series was canceled. The premise of the show, despite its higher technology and production values, was not entirely original. In the 1950s, during the earliest days of space opera television, a hokey series called Captain ZRO provided the exact same concept: an advanced Earth using a time machine to go back into history and manipulate the outcome for the benefit of mankind, including the tracking and monitoring of the events back in the laboratory.
Captain Zero and his associates experiment in time and space.
There were 2 issues put out by Gold Key Comics. These were reprinted by Hermes Press in 2012.
Once upon a time, out in California, a 67-year-old man lived with his 33-year-old son. There was this big avalanche.
2 days ago, there was an avalanche in Alaska. A frozen object was discovered that's been identified as your father.
After all these years,
I'd like to bring the body back here. Your father's alive.
The Second 100 Years is an American sitcom by Screen Gems starring Monty Markham, Arthur O'Connell, and Frank Maxwell, which aired on the ABC television network for one season from September 6, 1967, to September 19, 1968 for 26 episodes. In 1900, Luke Carpenter left his wife and infant son to take part in the Alaskan Gold Rush, but soon after his arrival was buried in a glacial avalanche. His burial was evidently so complete and so rapid that he survived in a state of suspended animation for 67 years. He was then thawed out and brought to the home of his now elderly son, Edwin Arthur O'Connell, who lives in Woodland Oaks, California. Though Luke was 101 years old, he looked to be the same age of his 33-year-old grandson, Ken.
There aren't even many buttons for galluses. Hey, son, why can't I wear my own clothes? Father, you shouldn't be taking Grandpa out at all. That's against Colonel Garraway's orders.
The humor centered around how Luke was younger, both in appearance and attitude, than both his son, who was 67, referenced in the pilot, but also his grandson Ken, who at 33 was the exact age at which Luke had disappeared and been preserved, and who was a near double for his grandfather. The series drew overwhelmingly negative reviews, but premiered with strong ratings. By October, however, the series dropped to the bottom 25. In March 1968, the series was moved to Thursday nights, replacing Batman, but was canceled by ABC a little more than a week later.
What's happening to us?
What's that thing out there, man?
Since I already did a show for Land of the Giants, which you can find here, I'm only going to do a brief synopsis in this show.
The year 1983, a spaceship out of control.
What are you doing? We can't level off. I need to get back in orbit.
Welcome to another show. Today we'll look back on a sci-fi classic, Irwin Allen's Land of the Giants.
We built a number of giant miniatures, and a giant miniature running over 100 feet high will give you an idea how tall the miniature was.
Allen was a giant among science fiction television of the 60s, perhaps best known for Lost in Space, but his legacy also includes Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which was also a feature film, The Time Tunnel, and today's topic, Land of the Giants, set in 1983. The series tells the tale of the crew and passengers of a suborbital transport ship named Spindrift. In the pilot episode, the Spindrift is en route from Los Angeles to London on an ultra-fast suborbital flight. Just beyond Earth's boundary with space, the Spindrift encounters a magnetic space storm and is dragged through a space warp to a mysterious planet where everything is 12 times larger than on Earth. The Spindrift crash lands, and the damage renders it inoperable. One continent, or hemisphere, is dominated by an authoritarian government that tolerates full freedoms within a capitalist system. The regular cast included Gary Conway as Captain Steve Burton, Don Matheson as Mark Wilson, Stephen Arngrim as Barry Lockridge, Don Marshall as Dan Erickson, Deanna Lund as Valerie Scott, Heather Young as Betty Hamilton, Kurt Kastner as Alexander Fitzhugh. The show was created by Irwin Allen, with a budget of $250,000 per episode. In 1968, Gold Key Comics published a comic book version of Land of the Giants, which ran to 5 issues. Comic book artist Alex Ross used Gary Conway and Deanna Lund as the visual basis for Reed Richards and Sue Storm in Fantastic Four: Full Circle.
Space, the final frontier.
Not a list of possible miracles, but a simple, basic, understandable why that overrides all danger.
They used to say that if man were meant to fly, he'd have wings. But he did fly. He discovered he had to. I don't believe we can stop. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds.
Now we come to the phenomenon known as Star Trek.
To seek out new life and new civilizations. To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Because I've done many shows based on the franchise, I'm only going to give a brief overview of the series here. Suffice to say, it's still alive today as a franchise thanks to Strange New Worlds. Star Trek is an American science fiction television series created by Gene Roddenberry that follows the adventures of the starship USS Enterprise, NCC 1701, and its crew. It acquired the retronym of Star Trek, the original series, TOS, to distinguish the show within the media franchise that it began. The show is set in the Milky Way galaxy, Between 2266 to 2269, the ship and crew are led by Captain James T. Kirk, First Officer and Science Officer Spock, and Chief Medical Officer Leonard H. Bones McCoy. Norway Productions and Desilu Productions produced the series from September 1966 to December 1967. Paramount Television produced the show from January 1968 to June 1969. Star Trek aired on NBC from September 8, 1966 to June 3, 1969. While on NBC, Star Trek's Nielsen ratings were low and the network canceled it after 3 seasons and 79 episodes. Several years later, the series became a hit in broadcast syndication, remaining so throughout the 1970s, achieving cult classic status and a developing influence on popular culture. Star Trek eventually spawned, as of this recording, a media franchise consisting of 11 television series, 13 feature films, and numerous books, games, and toys, and is now widely considered one of the most popular and influential television series of all time. On March 11, 1964, Gene Roddenberry, a longtime fan of science fiction, drafted a short treatment for a science fiction television series that he called Star Trek. Roddenberry noted a number of influences on his idea, some of which includes A.E. Van Voigt's Tales of the Spaceship Space Beagle, Eric Frank Russell's marathon series of stories, and the film Forbidden Planet. He often humorously referred to Captain Kirk as Horatio Hornblower in space. In April 1964, Roddenberry presented the Star Trek draft to Desilu Productions, a leading independent television production company. He met with Herbert F. Salo, Desilu's director of production. Salo saw promise in the idea and signed a 3-year program development contract with Roddenberry. Lucille Ball, head of Desilu, was not familiar with the nature of the project, but she was instrumental in getting the pilot produced. Desilu Productions had a first-look deal with CBS. Oscar Katz, Desilu's vice president of production, went with Roddenberry to pitch the series to the network. They refused to purchase the show, as they already had a similar program in development, the 1965 Irwin Allen series Lost in Space. Although some of the third season's episodes were considered of poorer quality, it gave Star Trek enough episodes for television syndication. Most shows require at least 4 seasons for syndication, because otherwise not enough episodes are available for daily stripping. Kaiser Broadcasting, however, purchased syndication rights for Star Trek during the first season for its stations in several large cities. The company arranged the unusual deal because it saw the show as effective counter-programming against the Big Three network's 6 p.m. evening news programs. Through syndication, Star Trek found a larger audience than it had on NBC, becoming a cult classic. Airing the show in the late afternoon or early evening attracted many new viewers, often young. By 1970, Paramount's trade advertisements claimed that the show had significantly improved its station's ratings, and the Los Angeles Times commented on Star Trek's ability to acquire the most enviable ratings in the syndication field. By 1972, what the Associated Press described as the show that won't die aired in more than 100 American cities and 60 other countries, and more than 3,000 fans attended the first Star Trek convention in New York City in January 1972. Star Trek has so many promotional tie-ins. Beginning with Gold Key, Star Trek comics have been in publication since TOS was on the air. The fans have kept the show alive and it's still going strong. That was our show for today. What did you think? Have you seen all of these shows? What was your favorite science fiction show from the 60s? Also, check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise in the comments section. While you're at it, I'd be honored if you subscribe to my channel. Click the button to stay informed and leave a comment. Until next time, this is Axel and for Kevin Given saying live long and prosper, may the force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.